America is known as the melting pot. We are the only country in the world that contains people from nearly every nation on the planet. Immigration refers to a person coming from a foreign country who intends to make their residency permanent. Since the first colonists arrived in the 15th century, immigration has not only persisted, but has been the driving force behind our country's economy, culture, and reputation. America's immigration experience can be broken down into several time periods, each with its own characteristics. The first period is the initial colonization until 1790. During this time, Europeans immigrated to escape religious persecution. During the 16th century, an event known as a Protestant Reformation was taking place. People were often forced to go back and forth between religions according to their king or queen's preferences. If they refused to convert, they would often be killed. America offered a place of refuge from the violence. After a prosperous economy here was established, many skilled laborers from the Old World came in mass numbers. During this time, Africans and Caribbeans were forcibly brought to the New World against their will as slaves. The second period takes place from 1790 until 1820. Immigration was not happening on a mass scale at this time, but there were French refugees fleeing a revolt in Haiti, as well as other small groups of people. After the War of 1812, immigrants from England, Ireland, and Western Europe entered the newly formed United States through our East Coast, in major cities such as Boston, New York, Philadelphia, and Charleston. The third period in our nation's immigration history takes place from 1820 to 1880. The Industrial Revolution was happening in America, and many came from Europe to take advantage of employment opportunities, which were becoming scarce in their own countries. Westward expansion in the U.S. paved the way for work on a transcontinental railroad, and the gold rush in California enticed Europeans and Asians to build their own fortunes. In the late 1840s, a potato famine in Ireland wreaked havoc on the country's most important crop. There was a massive influx of Irish into America at this time. Also, because of rapid population growth, industrialization, and changes in land distribution, conditions at home became unlivable. The millions of immigrants proved useful during the Civil War, but attitudes toward them were becoming hostile. They were cast out of society and accused of stealing jobs from American workers. The fourth period lasts between 1880 and 1930. This was the period with the most immigrants, numbered at over 27 million. With the invention of steamships, the journey across the Atlantic became much quicker and less life-threatening. America also started receiving immigrants from the Middle East, Southern and Eastern Europe, the Mediterranean, and even Canada. It was common for the husband or father to come first, find work, and then save up enough money to bring over the rest of his family. Because of the nation's hostility towards these new Americans, Congress passed the Chinese Exclusion Act in 1882, which dramatically reduced the number of Chinese allowed into the United States. In 1907, a similar law was passed, placing the same restrictions on the Japanese. During this time, Mexicans arrived fleeing a revolution in their own country. Jews came from Eastern Europe and Russia to escape violent attacks, and Armenians fled hostility in Turkey. Most of these immigrants settled into the lower portion of New York, where their cultural mark has been left for us to see today. The fifth period of our nation's immigration history takes place between 1930 and 1965. Because of the Great Depression, there was no significant reason to come to America. In fact, during this time, many recent immigrants, against their will, were sent back to their home countries like Mexico. With the coming of World War II, some tried to flee Nazi persecution, but were turned away when they came to America. Once the U.S. entered the war, German and Italian immigrants were detained, and the Japanese, even those already naturalized as American citizens, were treated harshly and placed in internment camps. The final period takes place from 1965, when Congress passed the Immigration and Naturalization Act, to the present. The 1965 Act allowed for immigration to resume again, as it had before, but this time, immigrants from every continent were encouraged. While the number of immigrants isn't as high as it was around the turn of the century, those from Mexico, Korea, India, and Vietnam, for example, are again transforming the face of America. Today, there are definitely questions to consider as the United States pushes forward. Does America have a duty to keep its doors open to the world? Can immigrants keep their own culture and language and still be considered American? There are people today, just like there were over a century ago, that feel newly arrived immigrants take jobs away from Americans. If immigration had been halted when it was in its prime, the United States would definitely not be the wonderfully diverse and culturally rich country it is today. We wouldn't have Chinatown, Mexican Town, or a Little India. We wouldn't have bagels, pizza, spaghetti, or tacos. We wouldn't even have elevators or vacuums, and perhaps the North would have not won the Civil War. Immigrants are an essential part of what makes up America today.